again, nature and nurture, and about how, this is kind of hard to see, nature are those inborn biological givens that are based on, this is a little bit bigger, what we inherit from our parents. Nurture is our physical and social world. We're influenced biologically and physically. And again, what we talked about this morning with the Western and Eastern understandings of the world and what's important absolutely affect us as we become adults. All right. Just real quickly, the other thing you need to understand, not only are we influenced by where we live in the world, either the West or the East, but also historically we're influenced by people. I'm going to show you some pictures. And I'm going to hit the lights for you. I want you guys to look at these pictures and look at the children in these pictures. And also, this picture's in your book. I'm going to find it in chapter 1. And I'm going to have a couple people come up to the board. Ashley, go up to the board and see if you can find, it's kind of hard to see, or look in your book and see if you can figure out what the kids are doing in these pictures. What are children in these pictures doing?
It's on page 12.
Page 12. What are the kids in these pictures doing? Let's see, I got a guy right here. Let's see if you guys can find that. You know, art is a great place to...
It's a little bit different.
Oh, your picture's a little different. Do you see those?
It's only a portion of it.
Okay, he's got a hoop. Can you kind of see that? He's got a hoop that he's playing. They're playing games, yeah. And oh, like over here, what does this look like over this portion? What does that look like? Like some little discs. You guys see these little discs right here?
Oh, that's a game too.
Like some kind of game. And then did you see this little boy right here? What is it? Yeah, he's got a stick. Somebody's playing a stick ball. And then see these little girls over here? They've got like the big wide skirts and they're spinning around like little girls do to make their dresses kind of spin out. And then these ones are bent over. Looks like they're kind of reading together. How does their clothing look? Is it tight? Is it restrictive? No. Does this look like it might be fun? A fun place to hang out? Does the kids look like they're having a good time? Yeah, look at this little boy. Do you see him? He's doing a headstand, right? It looks kind of honestly like you can see this is like a city in the summertime where kids are out at the park and they have a good time they're playing. We see a couple groups of parents. Here's a mom. Do you kind of see her? She's got her arms around the children. Look at this one, getting a piggyback ride. Did you see that? Okay, so this is a medieval picture. So we're talking probably the 14th century, so like 1300, 1400. And so looking at this, what kind of views do you think people, and look at all these ones together. You see they're all like kind of sitting together. It looks like somebody's storytelling. Like see this little boy, his arms are out like this. He's making a big gesture. What do you think that people that lived in medieval times, what were maybe their views on early childhood? So you want to write down the word medieval views. What do you think some of their views were of early childhood? Or of childhood in general? Are they positive, negative? What do you think? How did they view children?
Positively.
Yeah, absolutely. So they had a positive view. This is an important idea. They had a positive view of children. How did they dress them? A lot of times you can tell a lot by how the children are dressed. How are they dressed?
Just comfortable.
Absolutely. Loose, comfortable clothing. Comfortable clothing. Are they allowed to play?
Yes.
Yeah, so would you say that it was play-based? Are kids going to school? Do you think that these children are going to school? Does it look like they're going to school?
No.
No. Who went to school back in this period of time?
Boys.
Boys, but who got to go to school?
Rich people.
Only the wealthy. And so these kids, I mean, we've got kids that look like they're maybe not super wealthy because I don't see any nannies walking on the street or servants or bodyguards. So it's no formal schooling. And what are the expectations at this time? I mean, you're talking about careers and jobs. What do you need to learn to do? What are you basically going to be bored if you're...
It's going to be laboring.
What your parents do.
Right, so you're probably going to be a farmer, because about 80% of the people in this period are farmers. You don't have to go to school to learn to be a farmer. If you're going to do a trade, if you've got, which is going to be a little bit better income, then you're learning that from your parents. And if your dad's a blacksmith, you're probably going to be a blacksmith because you've got the tools and the apprenticeship opportunities. But for the most part, these kids look like they're having a really good time. All right, let's go to this next picture. Okay, so now we're looking at the Reformation. Reformation is going to happen more 15th, 16th century. So this we've got Henry VIII. We've got his two children here, Edward and Elizabeth. And how do these children look?
Uncomfortable.
Okay, very good. So we're going to write uncomfortable clothing. What else do you notice?
Very proper.
Very proper. You guys have heard the old saying, children should be seen and not
Heard.
Do you kind of get the sense of that?
Yeah.
Very stoic.
Should be seen, not heard. That's a good word for it, stoic. If you notice, these children, do these kids look like they spend time playing or do they spend more time in school?
Studying.
School.
Right, so more structure. Now, of course, still, it's going to be mostly wealthy. Children, kids go to school. But the Reformation is a time of religious reform. And people are talking about all different kinds of ideas. Remember, the Catholic Church, it starts losing its power. And there's all kinds of revolutions that are starting around the world. The French are rebelling against the Queen, and the English are struggling with their own rebellion. So there's a lot of unrest. And in a time when there's political unrest, right? Political unrest. How would you, like, let's say that it's a time of war. If there's a war in your country, how would you maybe take care of your children if it was war?
It'd be more hidden away.
Right, absolutely. So if you look at this picture, would you let your kids act like this
No.
in a time of war or political unrest? Or would you make sure your kids were closer to you and more protected and, you know, less intermingling? So you can kind of see how that's a reflection of the times. Okay, so now here, I love this period. This is called the Enlightenment period. We've got children here. What are these children doing?
Maybe figuring out a maze or building something.
Yeah, it looks like they're maybe right. They might be building, they might be figuring out a puzzle or a maze. It actually looks like a building to me because you see what this guy's doing right here? What's he got in his hand?
A hammer.
A hammer.
A chisel or a hammer. And then do you see what's happening back here?
On the ladder.
Right, he's climbing a ladder. So it looks more like, what is it? What do you think that child is kind of, what does it look like that he is? An architect. There we go. So it looks like he's maybe designed this and he's explaining this plan to his buddies. And how old do these look like old children?
Very young.
No, so what kind of views do you think that these people had on children? Do they see them as intelligent beings or do they see them
You
as...
sound very intelligent and
Okay,
capable.
so children are viewed as intelligent beings. Are children thought to be evil or are they thought to be good? How are these children painted?
It's a good guy.
Okay, so there's
They
this
got
idea that
flowers.
man is good. So children are inherently, do you know what that word inherently means? It means like all of us are born with a nature, and this is a very religious idea that affects our understanding politically, socially, economically, but are people born good or are they born evil? Okay, so in this picture it looks like they have a view of children as being good. Would you see that this picture supports schooling?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, but they need for schooling. And right about this time, we're hearing more people starting to say, you know, we shouldn't just educate the wealthy, we really should educate everyone. Is it happening yet? 16th, 17th century, or is everybody getting educated? No, you know, we forget how modern education is, this idea of everyone having an opportunity for education. Does everyone in every country, does every child in every country get to go to school?
No.
No. I have some friends who are missionaries in Nicaragua, and they send out support letters every year because the kids in Nicaragua, they do have public schools, but they can't attend the public schools unless they have a uniform. And the uniform costs $35. So you have to, they ask for $35 so that they can send the kids to school. And then they work in a very poor area, and they take that money and they distribute it. So last year they were able to send 400 kids to school, which is really cool. So it's a public school, but not everyone can attend. There are lots of places like that. the parish, my kids go to St. Joan of Arc, even though we're not Catholic, and at the parish they have a sister school in Africa, and they just recently did a whole fundraising campaign, and they said send a kid to school for $20 a year. Can you imagine that? For $20 you can send a child to school in Africa for a whole year. It's like, holy cow, compared to my tuition, that's a really good deal. I can send a couple kids to school, you know? All right, let's go to the next one. So we move out of this period, and so we're going to move towards a modern idea. And I want you to think about what starts happening. This is very important. Now, for a long time, we've had a religious perspective of the world. Really, from the start of known civilization, okay, until we get into about the 19th century. So about 1800, people really begin to question where people come from. And one of the really important guys that comes along is Charles Darwin. And Darwin's idea is called survival of the fittest, okay, origin of the species, and evolution. What does Darwin suggest? Radical idea. What does he suggest? Where does he say that we come from? From God, mythical creature, greater being. What does he say?
Evolutionary.
Yeah.
Right, right. The idea, science now kind of has a sense of, gosh, maybe it's not that God creates us and that we're here to do God's purposes, but maybe as a species we just evolved because we had skills that made us superior to other species on the earth. And that really challenges everybody, that really shakes up the world. It shakes up the world religiously, it shakes up the world politically, and it shakes the science world to its foundation, and it shakes up people's faith. Now, I don't agree with necessarily all these theories, but a theory is an idea or a way of explaining the world. And there are some things about evolution that do make sense. Let's look at this. Let's look at this for a second. I love this. Can you guys read this comic? Sorry, Ethan, but in the world of video game tournaments, it's survival of the fittest, and you just don't have the genes. Do you get it? This little boy saying to this big muscle-bound kid, you don't make the cut. You don't have what it takes. And he's saying, eventually, and it's very interesting. Scientists have been reading a lot and listening to a lot of neuroscientists talk about the effect that video games and technology is having. There's some indication, and hasn't been confirmed yet, that our thumbs are growing. Think about that our thumbs are growing and getting stronger in new babies. Why would that be?
Because of how much we use our thumbs.
That's right, exactly. Or that portion of our brain, because our brains control our bodies. The portion of our brain that actually, there's been some people theorize the portion of our brain that controls the thumb will grow. We do know now that babies in North America, their brains are wired differently than babies in Africa. They are wired differently. We're not totally sure what that means, but we know that there are differences already in the way that babies are being born. Now remember, think about when you're born, you haven't been exposed to any technology, but you're the product of your parents' genes. Think about that. That's amazing. Remarkable. Okay, so really we're into this new idea about evolutionary theory, and if babies are just developing, how does that affect development? If it's not a religious question about whether we're good or whether we're evil, the whole way that we look at development changes. Okay. And then, right about this time, people are saying, if it's survival of the fittest, then there's got to be some people are probably smarter than other people. So if you go back here to this idea, if you go back to that, remember the picture of the little boys? Okay, remember these little boys? Okay, does it look like all men are created equal here? Think about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights written about this period, and people are writing all men are created equal, right? This idea of equality. Well, then Darwin comes along and he says it's survival of the fittest, baby, and some people are more equipped than other people. So from that, people start to think, well, if there's some people that are smarter than other people, I bet we could figure it out early. How would we need to figure it out early? We'd have to do what?
Assessments.
We'd have to test them. Very good. We'd have to test them. So now, if you think about it, the only way to get data, if you want to figure out how smart a 5-year-old is or how smart a 6-year-old is, how can you do that? Do you collect a group of 10 kids, or what would you do?
You do the biggest group in general.
Absolutely. So So these guys, Hall and Gazelle, they start to collect huge groups of people to test. And they're in the United States, and they go around and they test thousands and thousands of kids to come up with some kind of idea of what a 4-year-old knows, what a 3-year-old knows, what a 5-year-old knows. And remember, what did we learn those achievements are called? Developmental what?
Milestones.
Right, and so they start coming up with this idea of milestones. Well, once they get the milestones in place, then they can do what you're talking about. Then they can move on, and they can start to test. So as soon as they start figuring out milestones, they move into this testing motion. This is a great comic. What's your IQ? Those tests are inherently flawed. Wow, that low, eh? People with high IQs, like to share that they have high IQs. So Benet and Simone are over in France, and they initially are doing the test because they're trying to identify kids that are late bloomers, that are delayed, and they think that they can maybe do some early schooling for them. But what they end up with is this test, an IQ test that can pretty accurately predict intelligence. And so that's kind of a new thing. So what can we do it with as a society, as a world, if we have a test that separates really smart people from people that aren't as smart? What can we do? What can we do if we know who the smart people are? What?
Look at how they were brought up.
Okay, look at how they're brought up, yeah. What do we do in schools with these tests?
It helped them differently.
You group them differently, and especially in high school, maybe not so much in elementary school, right? But in high school, there are placement tests. What do we do after high school with those tests? Some of you aren't that far away from high school. You took some tests at the end, right?
We segregate them as according to what colleges you can get into.
Right,
and
right. And
things of that
certain
nature.
colleges, you have to score a particular score. Baker's open admission, but there are some colleges where you're not getting in unless your ACT or SAT is so high. And those colleges are considered premier prestige institutions. So we still use those tests today to separate people and give people different opportunities to learn and grow. What about scholarships? Could you get scholarships if you have higher scores? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In a lot of cases, there are scholarships available to you if you score in a higher range. So we still are using those tests today, and that's important to know. Okay. When we have a hypothesis or a theory, it always starts with asking a question. Then we're going to do some research. We're going to think, is our hypothesis correct? We got to experiment, and then we're going to test to see if it's true. And I'm going to show you how I've used a scientific method with my own kids and with my own research, especially with autistic kids, to come up with some of my own theories about what works with kids. But what I want to do is give you guys a chance to try it yourself. So before we do it, you've been sitting for a while. You can turn it off for a second.